Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jessie. If you are new here, I do all kinds of videos about lifestyle, motherhood, being pregnant with my second baby, things like that. But today's video is actually going to be specific to those of you who are interested in understanding my autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's, and how that affects motherhood for me, how that's affected pregnancy. So if you're interested, keep on watching. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and TikTok if you don't already. Subscribe if you haven't. And then as I'm going along, I'm just gonna kind of be babbling out some things about Hashimoto's and motherhood and how it's affected me both positively and negatively. And if you have any questions or want me to expand on anything, leave those down below. But let's jump into this video. Okay, so I think the way I'm gonna do this is talk about pregnancy, getting pregnant, things like that. I have a whole video about getting pregnant with Hashimoto's, not medical help, but like what I was doing at the time that I got pregnant with Ivy. I'll talk about a little bit about hard parts with like toddler, with like raising a kid and Hashimoto's, things like that. And then I'll just talk about like recommendations and what's helped me. So starting with hard parts about getting pregnant and being pregnant. So it can be very difficult for people with Hashimoto's to get pregnant, especially if you're not consistently taking care of your Hashimoto's. So if you don't know that you have Hashimoto's, if you don't know that you have hypothyroidism in general, I should probably explain. Hypothyroidism means, I can put like it on the screen here for you guys, but basically it means that your thyroid isn't working at the capacity that it needs to be. Hashimoto's is the version of that that is autoimmune. So it means my body is basically attacking thyroid cells. So it can continue to cause a lot of damage. You can have more symptoms than somebody with just clinical hypothyroidism. Usually you need to be doing more than just taking medication when you have Hashimoto's. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know the technical terms of all of that stuff. I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism in 2011. I wasn't diagnosed with Hashimoto's until like 2016, but I most likely have had that the whole time. They're the same symptoms, it's just that I have antibodies showing up in my blood work. That's kind of the very basic version of Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. There's so much more to it. I'm not the person for that information. I'm just explaining to you how that's affected my motherhood journey. I am lucky in the sense, fortunate in the sense that Hashimoto's currently has not affected my fertility. I did have one miscarriage, but I don't know if that was because of Hashimoto's, anything like that. I have had low progesterone, but I've been working with doctors who are like very conscious of my levels. I work with functional medicine doctors, naturopaths, that kind of doctor. So they tend to be more proactive with medication, with lifestyle changes than your typical MD. Not all of them. Some might be great. Endocrinologists, I'm not sure. I haven't had the greatest experience with those, which is why I moved to the more alternative natural medicine, aka the way that medicine should be, in my opinion, in the sense that like a doctor is looking at you holistically versus just what medication can I give you. Because of that, I had been working on my hormone health. I had been off of birth control for a really long time. I had been taking care of my Hashimoto's. It was in a really good place. I was not inflamed. I wasn't dealing with a lot of things that people who have Hashimoto's or don't even know they have that deal with. So they might have unexplained infertility because of Hashimoto's. But for me, I had been working on all of those things by the time I wanted to get pregnant. So my body was in a fairly healthy spot. Now I will also say everybody's body is different, and I am not downplaying. I know that like fertility is so hard for so many people. So I'm not being like, it was easy for me, but I didn't have any issues with fertility for the most part. So I, like I said, had to watch progesterone, and they watch my Hashimoto's levels very closely. They have not affected the baby so far. They didn't affect Ivy so far. They haven't affected this baby. They affect me though, which I'll talk about in, in a little bit, and how that affects me during pregnancy. So one thing with being pregnant and having Hashimoto's is that Hashimoto's tends to cause fatigue, especially if you're not in a great place with your Hashimoto's. Having thyroid tired on top of being pregnant tired is just like not fair. Like it's just too much, you know? Like I was so exhausted in the beginning of my pregnancy, and it was like double what everybody else was feeling. Plus I had a toddler this time around, which that she does not care that I'm tired. She doesn't care. She still needs to eat. She still needs to play. She still needs to be a toddler and be rambunctious and get mad and get sassy and all those types of things, and be cute and wonderful and amazing too. It doesn't matter if you're tired. That was really hard for me, especially in first trimester. I feel like now, second trimester, I've hit a good wind with my energy. I feel like my medication levels are leveled out right now. I've been trying to take care of my body as best as possible. So I do feel like that's leveled out a little bit. Make sure somebody is watching your levels while you're pregnant, not only because it needs to be safe for you and baby, because there can be issues with pregnancy if you have Hashimoto's and your levels are really off. It also will just make you feel better. Like pregnancy, I think a lot of doctors always focus on the baby, and that is important, but it's also important for you not to feel 10 times worse than you even need to feel because you have Hashimoto symptoms on top of pregnancy symptoms, okay? So just make sure that you have somebody who is managing your medication, who is helping you manage lifestyle, whether that's cutting out gluten or paying attention to foods that make you not feel good, or drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, those types of things. Another thing that's been really hard with pregnancy and Hashimoto's for me personally is dealing with medication changes. So in my last pregnancy, they kind of forced me off of taking Armour, which was the medication I was taking, to levothyroxine. I'm not going to get into the medical side of it. I don't think that it was medically necessary, but they said that it was, so I did it. I was hyperthyroid the whole rest of my pregnancy, which didn't affect the baby, but it affected me. I had tons of, like, again, heart palpitations, things that you might deal with in pregnancy, but mine were like 1,000 times worse. Like heat exhaustion, just like racing heart, all of these things, because my thyroid levels were so off. But because they're like only focused on baby, they just like don't care that you aren't feeling well. And I really struggled with that because I feel like I understand where they're coming from, and yes, baby is a priority, but so is mom. And I think that's been the hardest part about being pregnant in general, but especially being pregnant with like a chronic illness, autoimmune disease. My health and well-being is still important. I'm still gonna do what's best for baby, even if that means I don't feel 100%, but I should be being taken care of and being checked up on and being listened to when things are going wrong. Anybody should, but especially having like chronic symptoms, I just kind of felt and still do feel a little bit ignored by doctors when it comes to this kind of stuff. That's just something I had to deal with, medication changes again in this pregnancy, and hopefully we can manage it a little bit better moving forward, but we'll see. And then one of the other hard parts, I guess, about being pregnant with Hashimoto's is you have more appointments. You're not necessarily considered high risk unless they notice issues. I have had to see like high risk doctors just to check on my medication levels and to check to make sure everything's going well with baby. Some babies, if your Hashimoto's levels are really off, can be born small. We all know that didn't happen with Ivy. She was almost 10 pounds, didn't have that issue at all. It is something that they still want to check. You aren't considered high risk unless something happens because of your Hashimoto's, but they do kind of do a few extra scans, things like that, just to make sure that everything's okay when you have Hashimoto's. So, which is good or bad. Some people are very against scans, things like that. For me, it was just like 1 or 2 extra times that I got to see the baby on the screen, which was really helpful for me. That's just something that you kind of have to deal with when you have any kind of chronic symptom or autoimmune disease, or you just find out that your pregnancy is high risk in general. I would say in general, motherhood as someone with a chronic illness can just be difficult. Like I was saying before, pregnant or not, having a daughter and having a chronic illness, not even a daughter, just having a child and having a chronic illness is really hard for me. I grew up with a mom that was sick all the time. We didn't get to do the things that we wanted to do because she was sick or something was going on with her health. And I just like really don't want to be that for Ivy. It's like finding the balance of taking care of myself enough preemptively so that I'm not having symptoms with my Hashimoto's. It's noticing when things are off and doing things to make changes about that. It's making lifestyle changes that aren't really fun, like not eating gluten, dairy, egg, those things that affect my inflammation levels. It's moving out of a moldy home when I find out that it's moldy, even though it's going to cost us well over 10 grand to make all the changes. It's doing all those kinds of things that they just take a little bit extra, you know? And then it's also just being kind to yourself and understanding that like some days are gonna be bad days. You're gonna have days where you're tired, you're gonna have days where you're exhausted or your thyroid levels are off, and you have to be okay with that happening. I will say one of the things that I think is important, there's like a difference between maybe the way I was parented versus how I want to parent when it comes to having like chronic symptoms, which is teaching Ivy that it's okay to rest. Teaching Ivy that it's okay to not only rest when you don't feel well, but to rest before you don't feel well. So rest is productive. Taking care of your body is productive. Eating foods that make you feel good is productive because it's helping you from down the line having any issues. On days where I don't feel well, I tell her that. Like, I don't feel super well today. Mama can't run around with you, but why don't we do this? Or whatever. Mama needs to like rest for a half an hour. Let's watch Bob the Builder. Let's, you know, things like that. I want to be honest with her, but I don't want to then make it feel like she has to be productive for me, or to think that every time I feel tired, I'm like stopping her from doing the things that she wants. I want her to grow up seeing rest as productive and important for your health, whether you have chronic symptoms or not. So a couple of my recommendations, I guess you could say. One is to find a good doctor and practitioner. I'm reading my notes. I personally have really liked the naturopathic functional medicine way, but even outside of that, if you're not interested in seeing that type of doctor, doing other things that help you, like seeing a chiropractor, seeing an acupuncturist, taking care of your health, seeing a dietitian, seeing a personal trainer who understands chronic illness and the way that you should be working out when you have thyroid disease, which means probably not doing HIIT workouts and CrossFit, but you know, things like that. It's just really important to find practitioners, whether you go alternative, regular, whatever way you go, and just make sure that it's somebody that listens to you, trusts your intuition about your body, wants to help you feel better. Isn't just being like, oh, your thyroid levels look normal, please leave my office. They're like, oh, your thyroid levels look normal, but you don't feel well. What can we do about that? Make sure you find somebody that can help you do that in whatever capacity that is. Another thing is ask for help when you can. That is one good thing about us living here, is just having more help close by to help with like Ivy, asking my husband for help. Both him and I deal with chronic symptoms for different reasons. We kind of like tag team when we can and hope that we both don't feel badly at the same time. But you know, if I'm like, when I was really struggling first trimester with being really tired, he was just letting me sleep in or take a nap or things like that, and understanding other things might not get done. So asking for help where you can is really important. That can also mean hiring a cleaner, hiring a babysitter, taking your dogs to get bathed by someone else, all those types of things. Like, find help in whatever ways you can afford that fit in your budget, but also make you feel less burdened, you know, especially when you're not going through like a great time. Take care of yourself first. This is hard even for me. Like, I think I've always just naturally taking care of other people first and then been like mad about it afterwards. But you really just need to take care of yourself. It kind of goes back to like what I do with Ivy, is like, there are going to be times where she's going to be disappointed or she's mad and wants to do something and I can't do it at that moment. And so just explaining to her and trying to teach her like why we have to do this, why we're going through this right now, what we can do instead, things like that, I think is really important. That also means like eating food that makes you feel good. Like for me, the last month or so, I've been eating out a lot. I've been eating or drinking a lot of Coke. I've been eating a lot more gluten and dairy, and I can tell, I can feel it. That's not taking care of myself first. So that's something that I easily can do. It doesn't affect anybody else. It doesn't feel like I'm taking less care of Ivy or less care of Ben or less care of my dogs. It just means that I'm taking care of myself in a very, very simple way. Try not to push yourself too far. This is something that I've always really struggled with. I think as a mom, this is also really hard to deal with. So some of the other things I said, like asking for help, things like that. But again, just doing like little things like, okay, you need to clean the house. Can you do it throughout a couple of days? If you're not feeling well today, can you do it tomorrow? Can you ask your husband for help, or your partner or your friend, or can you just leave it for a couple of days? And sometimes you can't. Sometimes the answer is no. But if you're able to do things like that, like for me, for example, we currently have a split level home. So that's 3 different levels. I clean each level on a different day. I rarely clean the whole house in one go because I know that that'll probably kick my butt. sorry, the air is gonna kick in. I think another thing to remember is that kids will love you no matter what. And we teach Ivy that sometimes mama or daddy is not feeling well, and we rest and we take it easy, and that's just what is happening. And I want to make sure that growing up that she understands that that's important. I kind of already talked about that one, but I just wanted to hit on it again because she gets mad for like 2 seconds when I don't have the energy to run around with her outside, but then we start playing in the water table or we start drawing with chalk and she's totally fine. Like, she's not gonna hate me forever because I can't push her lawnmower around the yard for the day, you know? I think my last comment, I'll just like read it so you guys can fully understand what I'm saying, but Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease. So it is attacking your body, but that doesn't need to be negative, but it is chronic. Try to find things that make you feel better, whether it's the way you eat, the type of exercise or movement you do, how you sleep, how you work, if possible, stress levels, things like that. For example, for me, and these are things I've done over the last 13 years since finding out I had Hashimoto's. I'm now at a place where I work for myself, I work remotely. Those are things that have been really helpful for me. Usually I eat gluten, dairy, and egg free, and those are really helpful for me. Drinking a lot of water is helpful for me. I can no longer do really crazy workouts, so I do things like take a walk, do Pilates, do light weightlifting, things like that that aren't getting my heart rate like super spiked, because if I spike it too much, it'll literally knock me out for the rest of the day, sometimes 2 days. So it's just not worth that for me. Working on my mental health, seeing a couples therapist and a personal therapist, getting on anxiety medication, all these things that are helping my health, like manage my levels so I'm not always up here, and taking everything down here will help in general with your Hashimoto's symptoms, antibodies, things like that. I hope this was helpful. Please leave any questions down below, any tips if you have Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism and you're a parent, or you are just interested in seeing how people manage their stuff, and leave that down below, and I will see you guys in the next video.